Yo, what's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another reaction video. We got 5 most overrated NFL players heading into the 2024 season. Let's check this out.
The NFL always has a couple of overrated players.
Now, we saw underrated players yesterday.
The 5 most overrated players heading into 2024.
Upload that shit yet.
So, as I said, we're going to be doing the 5 most overrated players in the NFL. If you guys want to see the 5 most underrated players in the NFL, go ahead and look back on my page. It is my most recent video. And before I head into my top 5, I want to hand out 2 honorable mentions. Both of these are going to be offensive linemen. One is going to be Zach Martin of the Dallas Cowboys, and 2 is going to be Orlando Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals.
Now, Orlando Brown, I understand, but Zach Martin overrated? Wow, that's a hot take right there,
just
bro.
Getting older. Last year was his probably worst year of his career.
I mean, I wouldn't call him overrated. He's just getting older.
Offensive lineman, which he should be, but I think he took a small step back last year. And then Orlando Brown, he's typically brought up in conversations as one of the potentially top 10 offensive tackles in the league, when I think he's a bit more closer to being around top 18 or so. But with that being said, let's hop into the list. Okay. Starting off at number 5, we're going to be talking about Saquon Barkley, the current running back for the Philadelphia Eagles, and yes, that is such a bizarre thing to say. Now, Saquon Barkley as a pure talent is arguably the most talented running back that we have in the league. But unfortunately for Saquon, the one thing that has consistently held him back from being the top running back in the league is going to be injuries and just his overall health. Through his 6-year career in the NFL, he's tallied a total of 1,200 rushing attempts, 5,211 yards, and 35 touchdowns. And when you compare those numbers to a running back that was taken in the later part of that draft, we can talk about Nick Chubb, who has a total of also 1,238 rushing attempts, 6,511 rushing yards, and 48 touchdowns. And that is with 2023 basically being a complete wash because he only played like 1.5 games. And I think when we talk about Saquon Barkley, the reason why I consider him to be a tad bit overrated at this point is because oftentimes when we talk about the top running back in the league, Saquon Barkley's name often comes up. But I think for Saquon Barkley, I can name a number of running backs that I would consider better than Saquon Barkley at this stage of their careers. I look at guys like Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, and
now, of course, I'm seeing Derrick Henry.
Those guys are better now and also have brighter futures. Now, the one thing I will say is that I think Saquon Barkley is going to have an awesome
I honestly think when healthy, Saquon is a top 5 running back in the league. I'm gonna say that right here.
Best offensive line and with the best team
when he's healthy, bro.
You can
like
make
his skill set is unreal.
Is not overrated because he's been playing with arguably the worst franchise in the NFL for quite some time. And if you do want to make that argument, then you have your right to do so. I don't necessarily disagree. But my argument back with that is that I don't think Saquon Barkley on the field is an overrated player. Like, he was the system for the New York Giants his entire tenure there. We all saw that 2022
he might have his best season yet to date this year with the Eagles.
And basically was the entire
shit. He may even lead the league in rushing yards this year. Now that he's behind one of the better offensive lines in the league, even though they don't have Jason Kelce anymore. But I feel like he might pop off for like good 1,400, 1,500 yards this year.
Playoffs. So when Saquon Barkley is healthy and playing, he's definitely not an overrated player. But when we're talking about Saquon Barkley just in general,
I'm glad he explained it more in depth.
Has he actually reached those expectations? In my opinion, in his career, he's only reached the expectations that we had on him maybe twice. And that was in 2018, his rookie season, and that was 2022 when he had an awesome year. But every year outside of those ones, he's been kind of disappointing. And that's not necessarily because he sucks, it's just because he can't stay healthy and he can't perform on the field to the level that we expect from him. Again, to reiterate, I think he's going to have an awesome 2024 season with the Philadelphia Eagles because that offensive line is going to do wonders for his career. But at 27 years of age, how many more years does he realistically have at this? Realistically speaking, with all his talent and with his athleticism, I do think it's going to start to dwindle probably within the next 3 years. So hopefully he can get a Super Bowl or have some really awesome seasons the next couple years to sort of fix his reputation. Next up at number 4, we're going to be talking about Devin White, the Philadelphia Eagles linebacker.
Oh yeah, now, I agree with this one 100%.
I
really do.
They've had a pretty awesome offseason, but I do ultimately have to tell the truth. And ultimately speaking, I do think that Saquon
I don't see nothing wrong with this one.
Overrated. Now I will say they are clear upgrades within their respective positions. Saquon is a much better running back than DeAndre Swift, and Devin White is probably their best linebacker that they've had over anybody they had last year. But for Devin White, the biggest reason why I think many people overrate him is because of how awesome he was was when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won their Super Bowl. But unfortunately for Devin White, since then he's kind of regressed into turning into a bad linebacker that oftentimes.
And he's still got like the speed and shit is still there. He just doesn't make as many good plays as he did when they won the Super Bowl.
Mistakes. He consistently misses tackles and sometimes just has some inexcusable lapses in coverage. I do think a change of going from Tampa Bay to Philadelphia could potentially make him a better player. But ultimately speaking, Devin White has just been really inconsistent as a linebacker and oftentimes has gotten benched by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers often throughout the season.
Damn.
Last year in 2023, he had a PFF grade of a 46 overall with 53 solo tackles and 20 assisted tackles. And I know that PFF is not a great tally of how good a player is, but when you're consistently getting less than 50 overall, that does tell you a lot. 2022, 55.5. 2021 was a 36.2. And in 2020, he was a 43.4. So again, I don't think that PFF is the say-all, be-all by any means. Like, I do think PFF is a mistake-prone process, but what I will say is, oftentimes they are pretty good at telling you whether a player is decent, bad, or good. And typically, when your overall is less than 50, 4 years of your career, you're probably not a great player. Now, I do think that Devin White has a lot of really good traits. I think he's a really solid athlete. I think when he makes the right reads, he's actually really good at making plays. And I think tackling wise,
what the fuck is going on right
but honestly speaking, he does make a lot of boneheaded mistakes more often than when he makes good mistakes. So again, as I said earlier, I do think that Philadelphia is getting,
but it's kind of crazy. Ever since who was the Bucks head coach when they won the Super Bowl? Bruce Arians. That's who I was talking about. Bruce Arians. It's like after Bruce Arians retired, that's when Devin White really started to, you know what I'm saying, get bad and shit like that. So maybe it's a coaching thing. Or maybe, you know what I'm saying, he actually sucks now, but I really think it's the coaching aspect of it.
Linebacker, that's probably their best talent in their linebacking room, but we will see if it ends up paying off for them. Next up at number 3, we're going to be talking about DeAndre Swift, the Chicago Bears running back, and again, another Philadelphia Eagles, this time somebody who's leaving their team. Now for DeAndre Swift, he's had kind of a really odd career.
I mean, I don't think he's overrated. You know what I'm saying? He's obviously dealt with injuries in his career as well. And then at the time that he was with Detroit, I don't think they really had that much of a good offensive line that they have now. And Detroit was still a bad team. But him going to Philly, I'm saying having the best season of his career, putting up over 1,000 yards, I think that really showed the true DeAndre Swift. And now him going to Chicago, I feel like Chicago is trending upwards, and maybe he has another great 1,000-yard receiving season, but rushing season. But if he somehow does take a step back, maybe you could say he was overrated for just having one good season and being carried by the good offensive line that is the Philadelphia Eagles. But if he does have another great season, then you can't really say he's overrated.
Detroit
you know
Lions, there was a ton of hype surrounding his name because of who he could be with that Detroit Lions team. But unfortunately with the Lions, it just really never worked out. He only was able to tally about 1,500 rushing yards throughout his 3-year career there, before ultimately reviving his career with Philadelphia, where he had 1,049 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. Now, the problem for DeAndre Swift has never been his abilities or his athletic process or anything like that. It's always been his mental process. The dude can take an open lane and rush it 50 yards down the field with ease, while also being able to take a screen pass for a touchdown. But when it comes down to it, one of the biggest parts about being a running back is being able to read your offensive line and being able to pass protect. And being able to take a rushing play where the offensive line doesn't open up a hole and turn it into something. But unfortunately for DeAndre Swift, number one, his size doesn't allow him to do that. But number two, he's just never been really good at doing that with his mental process. Again, when you give him a wide, gaping open hole, he's going to hit it and he's going to do pretty damn good with that run. Again, there's a reason why he had 1,000 rushing yards with the Eagles, because that offensive line is awesome. But I do think when you take away these wide open holes and you force him to make these crazy reads and you force him to play the running back position like a running back should, DeAndre Swift typically struggles. Now, I will say this, I actually think he's a good fit with the Chicago Bears because you have a number of running backs already there who can do some of the things that he struggles at instead of DeAndre Swift. You look at Roschon Johnson, who's a bit more of a downfield runner who can break tackles and follow blocks. Like, he's just a really good running back. And then you have Khalil Herbert, who's a do-it-all guy. but you can use DeAndre Swift in sort of a manner similar to how the Philadelphia Eagles did later in the season, where it's like, yeah, you can run maybe 20 times a game, but you can also use him in the pass game as well.
Yeah.
Fortunately for DeAndre Swift, he's probably not going to be asked to do a whole lot of pass protection because you already have Roschon Johnson. But in general, I think when we talk about DeAndre Swift, I think oftentimes we mention his name with being a top 20 running back, when realistically speaking, I don't really think he's top 20. I know the stats last year would make you think that he was because he got 1,000 rushing yards, but just realistically speaking, throughout his entire career, he's never been a top 20 running back, and I don't think he's going to be one next year. Coming in at number 2, we're going to be talking about Kayvon Thibodeau of the
Thibodeau.
Giants.
Oh, now this one
player, and I feel like I'm picking on the
interesting
here, but I'm not. They just have a bunch of overrated players. Now, last year, Kayvon Thibodeau actually had 11.5 sacks, which on paper sounds fantastic. But I don't know the exact percentage of the sacks were wide open, but a lot of the sacks that he had last year were just blown blocking assignments. If you've actually sat back and watched the film on every single one of Kayvon Thibodeau's sacks or big plays, a lot of them were just really odd plays that allowed Kayvon Thibodeau to take advantage of the situation. Now, Kayvon Thibodeau's
this is why I think sacks aren't really, you know what I'm saying, a big factor. They don't really matter as of much. I feel like pressure rates and what's the other one? Pressure rates, and it's something else I forgot, but I feel like pressure rates really matter the most other than sacks, because you're really blowing up the play even more with getting pressure to the quarterback. Maybe forces them to throw an interception or make one boneheaded mistake that'll really flip the game around. I feel like sacks really don't matter as much as they used to.
This dude has a ton of different talents and abilities that he hasn't really had to use on the field because he's been pretty successful doing what he's been doing. But I do think once those blown blocking assignments start to dry up a little bit, I do wonder what Thibodeau's production is going to look like. Now, I do think Thibodeau is a pretty solid run defender, but when it comes down to it, the edge rushing position is more of a pass rush oriented position. And if you're not a fantastic pass rusher that has a plethora of different pass rushing moves, like we see guys like Trey Hendrickson and Micah Parsons have, then I don't really know how much value you bring to that position. And again, I know Kayvon had 11.5 sacks last year, and I'm not here to say that all 11.5 of those sacks were just blown blocking assignments, because that's just not true. But at the end of the day, a big bulk of them were. So I think for Kayvon Thibodeau, what I want to see from him next year is I want to see him beat these offensive tackles cleanly. I don't want to see him beat up bad offensive tackles who make bad plays. I want to see Kayvon Thibodeau beat good offensive tackles and make big plays for his defense.
That's fair enough.
He now has a dominant defensive line beside him with guys like Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence.
With Brian Burns being there, that's going to give him more 1v1 opportunities and shit like that, because Brian Burns is probably going to be getting double teamed a lot. So with him, you know what I'm saying, being on an island, that's he's going to be able to show them, is he really a true elite edge rusher,
Take advantage of some of these offensive tackle matchups that he's going to have. When he goes into Dallas next year, I want to see him beat up on Tyler Guyton. I personally think that Kayvon Thibodeau has the talent that you would want in a top tier defensive lineman. But last year, I just was really unimpressed when I was watching his film, because I came into the film room thinking, oh, this guy had 11.5 sacks. I'm expecting some big plays, but like the majority of them were just really bizarre plays that allowed him to get sacks. Again, credit to him for making the plays there, but at the end of the day, Kayvon Thibodeau's got to prove it on the field against actual proven offensive tackles and actually good blocking assignments. But number 1 is going to be Deebo Samuel. Now, unfortunately for Deebo Samuel, I do think that he is a talented player that
this one is interesting right here.
Awesome. And I do think San Francisco is one of the better systems to put around him. But in his
now, my opinion on Deebo, I don't think he's your true, you know what I'm saying, wide receiver. He's your wide receiver / running back. He's similar to Cordero Patterson in a way. You know what I'm saying? He's still a pretty good wide receiver, but I think he produces more when he's in the backfield, you know what I'm saying, coming out the backfield and getting handoffs and jet sweeps and shit. I feel like that's when he contributes the most.
1,000 receiving yard season, and that came in 2021 when he had that breakout season. But outside of that 2021 season, in 2019 he had 802 yards, in 2020 he had 391 yards, in 2022 he had 632 yards, and in 2023 he had less than 900 yards. And I do know that a lot of his production does come from his rushing ability, but I also kind of believe that that's a little bit overstated, because when you look at his rushing yards, in 2019 he only had 159 rushing yards, in 2020 only 26, 2021 was his biggest year with 365 rushing yards, 2022 232, and 2023 225. So yes, in total last year he did produce over 1,000 scrimmage yards, but regardless of that, I think he's extremely overrated. For a guy who's getting paid upwards of over $25 million per year, he is the third option on that team, and some nights he is the
That is crazy though. I ain't gonna lie, that is crazy.
that they can utilize. Guys like Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey.
Technically, he's the fourth option because number one is CMC. And then Ayuk, then Kittle, and then Deebo, bro.
Kittle, and some nights, and I would say most nights, he is the third option, if not the fourth option on that team. Yeah. Christian McCaffrey is obviously the biggest piece of that offense. He is the most dominant player in the NFL outside of maybe Patrick Mahomes. And then Brandon Ayuk has emerged as being the true number one wide receiver in that team. And then, of course, George Kittle has been a consistent tight end that has been doing a lot of really big things throughout his entire tenure with the 49ers. Yeah. Now, when Deebo Samuel is healthy and actually playing at a high level, he's a really fun and entertaining player that many people will fall in love with. But unfortunately for him, he struggled with health and he just struggled with being a productive player on the team. And I think when you
if he didn't do with injuries last year, he would have definitely eclipsed over 1,000 yards.
Deebo Samuel is somebody that they typically don't want to pay. He's got talent and he has flexibility and he could do a lot of really good things, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, I would rather have Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, and arguably George Kittle over a guy like Deebo Samuel.
Facts. That's why you need to trade Deebo.
To conclude the list. If you guys have any other names that you guys want to throw out as being overrated, you guys can let me know in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.
Hey man, what do you guys think about this list? Y'all let me know down in the comments below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Turn on post notification, notify whenever I drop another banger video. One road to 300 subs. I'm gonna get there for more banger NFL content like this. And without further ado, I'm out. Gang.